You're watching Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Good evening, Guam. I'm Jess Lujan. Welcome to this edition of The Buzz. So fortunate to have great people here tonight. No, I'm not being arrested. Yes, I know last week we were talking medicinal marijuana, and yes, I have two judges in front of me today, but we're talking a little bit about that this evening. We have the presiding judge, Superior Court of Guam, Judge Alberto Lamarena. Good evening, Judge.
Okay, thank you, Senator, for inviting me.
And we have also retired Judge Peggy Fulton-Hara, a Superior Court retired judge from out of California, specifically out of San Francisco.
Yes, Senator.
And good evening to you.
Thank you.
And welcome to Guam.
I'm so happy to be here.
And spend a lot of money, please. There we go. You're here for a conference, Impaired Driving. Of course, last week we had medicinal marijuana a couple months back before her announcement to run for Attorney General of Guam, Liz Barrett-Anderson, Judge Liz Barrett-Anderson. We talked about drug court, and my understanding is this is one of your specialty areas.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, Presiding Judge, please introduce her formally and what brought this whole thing about. And actually, really timely because we're in pista season, you know.
Okay. Yes, I met Judge Hora. I was fortunate enough to go to a conference at the National Judicial College in Reno, and she was one of the key lecturers. And I was asked by the Pacific Judicial Council Executive Committee, which includes all the jurisdictions in Micronesia, which includes Guam, the CNMI, Guam, Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, Palau, Micronesia, Yap, Ponape, Costa and the American Samoa. And I was tasked to have a driving while impaired conference because we wanted to educate the public. Because, you know, when you talk about DWI, you think about alcohol.
Sure.
And the goals of Guam are very broad. Driving while impaired not only includes the consumption of alcohol, but any illicit drug or prescription drug that you consume that you're not supposed to consume while you're driving. And so I went to that conference, and I was very impressed with Judge Hora because of her experience and knowledge in this area. And so I asked her to come here to Guam to be one of our guest speakers. And needless to say, she was a big hit at the conference. A lot of the judges and the attorneys that were present and treatment providers and probation officers and law enforcement really liked her presentation.
Sure. And actually, when I'm reading your background, and you're as Liz would call herself, she goes, I'm a judge that looks and a more therapeutic judge. She calls herself basically, and basically that's what you are.
That's right.
You don't look really to put people to incarcerate people, but you're looking to really look at this as an illness, basically. That's how you look at it, right?
Well, some people need to be incarcerated. Let's be clear about that. Some people among us just can't stop from hurting us, and we need to protect the public and ourselves. There's no question about it. However, we tend to over-incarcerate, and what that leads to is a less safe community. It costs more money, and it's just a waste because these people, no matter how gripped by alcohol and other drug disorders, can be saved. I mean, it's not a throwaway. With good treatment, with appropriate targeting, the courts can be very helpful and use what's called a therapeutic jurisprudence approach to these cases. And we know now that the high-risk, high-need offender does very well in a structured drug court setting. Also DWI court, reentry court, other kinds of courts that address people with these particular problems. So
now, and I'm glad you're pointing this out because it's not only our jurisdiction here that's greatly challenged, and it's prison and overcrowding and all that. I mean, we're not the only ones, right?
Heavens no.
Yeah, but also let me ask you this, because is this an area, because once one is sentenced, right, and they're incarcerated, okay, it kind of removes them a little bit from your hands. Now it's in DOCs, but if you keep them in drug court, you have a hand on them, right? You have a hand on them in the treatment and things of that nature. So, so basically what you're saying, I want you under my control right now. I don't want to let you go because I know that system there is greatly challenged. You may not have the treatment. You may not have the appropriate medical needs or something that can be given to you there. But in this drug court, I can provide that for you. Is that basically?
Yes, and the judge is the head of the team. It's a therapeutic team approach, so it addresses not only the risk factors of the defendants who are going to be a danger, but also their needs to have them successfully complete probation. So we're not talking about risk in terms of dangerousness, we're talking about risk in the ability to fill out a sentence, become a productive member of society. And they've said in all the studies that have looked at it, the judge is the most important factor. Having a judge there telling the person, tracking their progress, encouraging them when they're doing well, responding appropriately when they're not doing well. And not necessarily just by throwing them in jail, but using graduated intermediate sanctions, using principles, social science principles like motivational interviewing and stages of change, really finding a way to help that person find the internal motivation that they're going to need to stay clean forever. We only have them for a short period of time. We have to find that internal change in them, or it's just a short-term solution. So we're looking long-term, and 75% of drug court graduates never see another pair of handcuffs.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, because one of the things I read about as well is that through drug court, you lower the incidence of recidivism.
That's
basically.
right.
And I've sat in Judge Lamorena's court before where he knows some of these people that come before them, you know, by first name, you know.
Absolutely.
You're here again.
And their mother and their brother.
Yeah, that's right. But just how do you deal with this in this sense? Because even like in drug court, when you have, now I don't know if you have the same demographics that we do in the sense of the repeat offenders and basically brand new culture, you know, maybe a cultural shock, and then because they're not necessarily from here, they're not quite meshing in with the community and not quite meshing in again when they would go back to their place of origin. So how do you balance that when this is their remedy?
Well, of course, there's a cultural overlay to everything, and cultural competence, proficiency by the court, and the whole team is necessary to adequately address that individual's needs. And the nice thing about these treatment plans, the nice thing about terms and conditions of probation, it's not one size fits all. It is specifically geared towards what this individual is going to need, whether it's language issues, cultural issues, everything else.
All the above.
All of the above. And the alienation that they may feel by being here. We have, you know, the same thing in the mainland with lots of different groups. People from all over the world come and end up in trouble sometimes. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, of course, a couple weeks ago, medicinal marijuana had passed, and we'll talk about that.
Great.
I know you were asked about that. I'm sure. Well, I don't know if it's going to appear before your court, but maybe I can ask her. Right?
Yes. You can ask her.
We'll be right back.